Putin got scared after Trump's threats to impose sanctions on the Russian oil pipeline and shadow fleet. Russia returned to negotiations, a new focal point of escalation and increased international tension. China is conducting large-scale exercises near Taiwan. While Russia is stalling, the amount of its frozen assets is growing. New sanctions from the EU have come into effect. Russia is experiencing the largest drought in the last 14 years. Watch about this and more in the new episode of Hotspot. After Trump's threats to impose sanctions on Russian oil and the shadow fleet, they decided to return to negotiations, assuring that despite various statements, work towards achieving a ceasefire in Ukraine continues.
A professional indicator that it has some errors. Putin's talking mustache.
In response to Trump's threats, Peskov hurried to assure the public, Russia will continue to work with the USA, including on the issue of resolving the war with Ukraine. We are implementing ideas for the Ukrainian settlement. Expect more exercises due to Taiwan's political confrontation and polarized domestic politics. If the ruling party seeks to provoke beautiful, lovely human beings a week, and I wanted to stop. And some people would say, why do you worry about Russian? So if you see Ukrainians, so if you say we're because it's just like new people, they're like us. It's like all of us. Oh, I want to make sure that he eats, that positively such waters containing, and what are you doing? Maybe it will start the whole day, she said. It turns out they must dress up as Putin's talking mustaches. Peskov, in response to Trump's threats, hastened to assure the public that Russia will continue its work.
Events in their favor, it's a very good tactic to provoke China.
China will respond decisively, and this will significantly and profoundly make Taiwan a victim of such pressure. Thus, it greatly helps the ruling party to gain votes in the region. The United States of America, negatively.
The Kremlin has no desire to achieve peace. The Moscow Times, citing 2 active Russian diplomats and a source close to the Kremlin, reports that the Kremlin still pursues maximalist goals in the war. The maximum program is the capitulation of Kyiv, a change of power, a reboot of Ukrainian statehood on Russian terms, and the transformation of the country into an analog of modern Belarus, completely dependent on Moscow.
A new focal point of escalation and an increase in international reacted to China's military exercises near Taiwan. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that it is important for Washington to maintain peace in the region.
The president emphasizes the importance of maintaining peace in the Taiwan Strait, encouraging a peaceful resolution of these issues, and reiterates our rejection of any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion. According to the annual report by U.S. intelligence agencies, China remains the main military and cyber threat to the United States. Don Keller for practicing strikes on land and sea targets, as the Chinese side's maneuvers are aimed at practicing the ability to block the island. Like Kenkop Turimer, like Reuters reports that Washington is considering scenarios in which Beijing might strike U.S. territory, attack American facilities.
The People's Liberation Army of China announced today a so-called new name for the exercises. But regardless of the name, it cannot hide the blatantly provocative nature of the exercises and their mentality of threatening the people of Taiwan.
The Ministry of Defense of Taiwan stated that it does not have data on live fire drills near the island. However, the department noted that 37 Chinese aircraft Taiwan's air defense zone. Taipei is preparing for war with Beijing, writes Bloomberg. And it considers 2027 as a potential date for a Chinese invasion.
This year we can expect even more drills because there is currently a huge political confrontation in Taiwan as well as a very polarized internal politics. Therefore, if the ruling party wants to use the opportunity to provoke events in its favor, it is a very good tactic to provoke China. China will respond, and this will make Taiwan a victim of such pressure. Thus, it greatly helps the ruling party to gain votes.
The United States of America reacted negatively to China's military exercises near Taiwan. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that it is important for Washington to maintain peace in the region.
The president emphasizes the importance of maintaining peace in the Taiwan Strait, encouraging a peaceful resolution to these issues, Ivanov states Annan. In space, the acceptance of any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion.
According to the annual report of American intelligence agencies, the PRC remains the main military and cyber threat to the USA. As reported by Reuters, Washington is considering scenarios in which Beijing might strike U.S. territory, attack American assets in space, and threaten the country's infrastructure through cyber attacks. The Washington Post also notes that Taiwan is becoming a key challenge for the USA. The Pentagon is reviewing military strategy and preparing for a possible conflict with China.
For China, this is a red line. And China will negotiate with the new administration, stating that it is categorically against U.S. support for Taiwan and against the provision of weapons that Taiwan receives, asserting that it is its territory and it will defend it. On their part, the United States, well, at least from what we see now, Trump is not making statements that would irritate China, such as declarations of independence or strong support for Taiwan.
The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs rejects accusations from foreign states regarding the escalation of tensions in the region. The representative of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Guo Zekun, noted that the Chinese army will continue to apply certain punitive countermeasures, as long as alleged provocations from Taiwan persist.
The accusations against China, put forward by a handful of countries, ignore the facts, distort the truth, and interfere in China's internal affairs. China strongly condemns this and firmly opposes it. The Taiwan issue is exclusively a part of China's internal affairs and does not tolerate foreign interference.
The European Union also calls on China to exercise restraint and avoid steps that could escalate tensions in the region. Earlier in Brussels, the possibility of increasing military presence, including participation in patrolling the Taiwan Strait, was discussed.
While Russia is stalling for time, the amount of its frozen assets is also growing, from almost 6 to 7.5 billion francs. The reason for the increase was the additional blocking of Russian funds. This was reported in Switzerland. The use of these funds is only a matter of time. Watch more details in this report.
The G5 plus states, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Poland, have announced their readiness to intensify sanctions pressure on Russia. In a joint statement, the foreign ministers of the 6 countries assured that they would use all available tools to prevent the Russian Federation from continuing its war against Ukraine. Furthermore, they confirmed that Russian assets in Western countries should remain frozen.
We remain committed to supporting the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine in coordination with international partners. We reiterate that Russian assets must remain immobilized until Russia ceases its aggressive war against Ukraine and compensates for the damage caused. From the joint statement of the G5 plus foreign ministers on the website of the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs,
the European Union countries reached a similar conclusion at the EU summit on March 20th. However, Ukraine continues to insist on the necessity of confiscating Russian assets. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, the seizure needs to be carried out in the near future, as after the potential end of the war, such an opportunity may no longer exist.
The safest option is to take these frozen assets and spend them on what Russia is destroying, restoring logistics, the army, building bomb shelters for children in schools, universities, and hospitals, and there is a lot of that. I believe that if we don't find a way not only to freeze but also to seize these funds, it may happen that after the war ends, we will still have to fight with the Russians for these assets. So, in order not to have to fight later, we need to seize them while we have the opportunity.
The most skeptical about the confiscation of Russian funds are in Berlin and Brussels. Among their arguments against are legal ones. For example, the fact that the assets fall under sovereign immunity and market concerns, worries about the stability of the euro and the favorability of the EU investment climate.
There is a simple solution that addresses all these issues. Europe needs to use the countermeasure argument and move the assets out of Moscow's reach. This can be done by transferring them to a new instrument created in Belgium under EU supervision and transferring the legal ownership of the assets to a trust in favor of Ukraine. Importantly, the assets will not be transferred to Ukraine, but will be used to create a permanent stream of annuity income to support its defense procurements and ongoing funding needs. From an article by the head of the European Center for Financial and Security Studies and the director of the Center for Financial Crime and Security Studies at the Royal United Services Institute, Kindi, Redlaskaya, and Tom Keating for Politico.
Poland, the Czech Republic, the Baltic and Northern European countries consistently advocate for the confiscation of Russian assets and their use for Ukraine's needs. Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys noted that the frozen funds of the Federation can be used as leverage against Moscow, which is sabotaging attempts to move towards peace.
Therefore, when speaking about Russians, we believe in those measures and precedents that have worked before. Firm military force, the use of economic restrictive measures, sanctions, and the use of frozen assets as leverage. If this is the first time in history that Russia behaves differently, I will be very surprised. Kęstutis Budrys, Lithuanian Foreign Minister, in an interview with RBC Ukraine.
In Tadeu 2022, after the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the group of 7 countries froze the assets of the Central Bank of Russia totaling nearly 300 billion euros. They are held in financial institutions around the world and generate income. Currently, the USA, EU, UK, Canada and Japan are using it as collateral for a loan to Ukraine amounting to 45 billion euros. As of November 2024, the total amount of direct documented damage that Russia has inflicted on Ukraine's infrastructure is about $170 billion, according to the Kyiv School of Economics.
In Russia, the largest draft in the last 14 years. The numbers are staggering. 160,000 conscripts. According to Russian officials, this is a draft for mandatory service and is in no way related to the war in Ukraine. But how many of the newly enlisted will eventually sign a contract is a rhetorical question.
They act courageously, professionally, heroically fulfilling their military duty, successfully addressing the crucial task of ensuring the security of our people and our motherland.
From April 1st to July 15th, 2025, the largest military draft in Russia began. Putin now signed the decree. For the first time in 14 years, 160,000 people aged 18 to 30 will be conscripted into the Russian army. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation assures that the campaign is in no way related to the so-called special military operation. Paper summons remain legally significant. But starting with this draft, electronic summons will also be implemented in Russia. If a conscript receives one, they will not be allowed to leave the country. A day before the draft, conscripts were already being taken directly off planes. I don't know what this is. Without a medical examination and a draft board meeting, he was immediately issued a summons for dispatch on April 16th.
In general, military service is an indicator of one's attitude towards the state, the homeland, the land, and the people, whom sometimes need to be defended.
The Kremlin is determined. Inspections are organized in educational institutions and checks in public places.
The maximum possible number of citizens is being summoned. You know this well. Future conscripts undergo medical examinations, professional and psychological selection, and at the draft board meeting, an appropriate decision is made regarding them, either conscription, deferment, exemption, and so on.
A new 160,000. Why does Putin need even more conscripts? For comparison, in 22, 134,500 Russian men were drafted during the spring conscription. In 23, 147,000, and in 24, 150,000.
And there will be no additional draft of reservists from the reserve. The tasks set are solved only by professional military personnel.
The increase in the number of conscripts is related to the dictator's decrees on the phased increase of the Russian army's size.
That is, the ideologically driven ones ended long ago, about 2 years ago. The contract soldiers have now run out, even with large sums of money, 5 to 6 million rubles. The mobilized ones have run out. The prisoners have run out. Now, the conscripts have started coming in.
The Russian authorities are once again promising that conscripts supposedly will not be sent to the deployment points of the armed forces units in the so-called LPR and DPR, as well as in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions of Ukraine.
Soldiers serving mandatory military service do not and will not participate in combat operations.
Contrary to dictator Putin's promises that conscript soldiers would not participate in the war, conscripts began dying on the first day of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
They consciously taking the draft notices in their hands, without hiding, without running away anywhere, went to defend the motherland. But they are not professional soldiers. They have not gone through the path that could, so to speak, give them the opportunity to feel confident on the front line, on the first echelon of the front line.
In the army, they were taught to march in formation, paint and plaster for the commanders, and in the end, they found themselves in a bloody war.
And honestly, everyone goes with the desire to serve because they understand the mindset that, yes, the country is in such a situation.
Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, more than 170 conscript soldiers have died on the front. The actual number of casualties is obviously higher. There are many more conscripts who managed to sign a contract before they died. The names and surnames of 2,358 deceased aged 18 to 20 have been officially confirmed. More than half of the deceased are young men from small Russian towns and settlements.
How many men, how many guys are suffering in the war? How many mothers are there of the local fallen sons?
At least 14 conscripts died in the sinking of the missile cruiser Moskva. And the authorities denied it. There are no losses among the crew members of the missile cruiser Moskva. All sailors were evacuated in time.
I will quote the Russian Ministry of Defense. During the fight for the cruiser's survival, 1 serviceman died and another 27 crew members went missing.
To have them recognized as deceased and confirm that they died during combat operations, relatives had to go to court. Since the fall of 22, conscripts have been actively used to guard the Russian-Ukrainian border at its most challenging sections.
Your involvement in organizing the passage of refugees, helping women, children, the elderly, everyone seeking refuge and protection in Russia.
During the large-scale breakthrough of the armed forces of Ukraine into the territory of the Kursk region, it was the conscript soldiers who found themselves on the front line of the Russian defense. They did not have heavy weapons and equipment.
I want to thank you for your conscientious service and especially commend all the border guards participating in the special military operation, fighting against neo-Nazis. I am confident that in the future you will continue to act selflessly, bravely, and decisively, skillfully and effectively, using all available forces and means to protect the sovereignty, territorial integrity of Russia, and the safety of our people.
In the spring of 23, the State Duma allowed signing a contract with the army after the 11th grade. Recent high school graduates, along with other contract soldiers, are allowed to be sent to the front just 4 weeks after starting service.
Conditions need to be created that would motivate, such that a person understands they went to defend their country, served in the army, and after that, they have the opportunity to get a preferential mortgage, enter a university, and get a job.
Contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense have become indefinite. The authorities are silent about the fact that, according to Putin's decree, they will not be able to terminate the contract until the end of the war with Ukraine.